Hey there, welcome back. This is another short grief-oriented um, episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, number two in a series of two so far anyway, with my very dear friend, Melody LeBaron. Melody, thank you so much for our first episode, which I would call the more personal side of the grief path as we have come to share it. And we had just enough space to get a short window into your extensive history with grief, with loss at a very personal level. And thank you again for your ongoing, seems like ease with sharing something so deeply personal and so deep in a person's experience. Thank you. And it is a joy to be looking forward to from in May on in this year. We're going to be doing more of our grief work together. We've got a 2-day grief retreat, and it's online, and all the information that a person might want to see if that's something you want to do, anybody who's watching, all that information about that and a couple of other things that we're offering is going to be down in the show notes here. And this particular video, I wanted to spend a bit of time, both of us sharing about a larger scale of the grief experience. The personal one is probably a whole lot easier for people to just kind of get their head around, even if you're like me. I grew up as reluctant to experience grief as anybody. It was just not a pleasant thing. It was something to avoid and get away from and so on. But I think you and I both have had a tremendous amount of experience, personal experience on the path where it's deepened and morphed. It's literally transformed. Grief, in my view, has completely changed to something that is actually a doorway into what I believe has often been called soul. Our souls live here. This is a downward descent into the depths of what it is to be a human being and to be a human being with others on this planet and also with the beyond human population on the planet. It's an extraordinary territory. And as we mentioned in the last video, our mentor, Francis Weller, speaks about creating an apprenticeship with grief. And that's really what it's felt like for me. I've had a number of mentors in my life for a number of paths or lineages, and this is one of the most profound. And I think I'd like to just start with sharing a little bit about how I first experienced this huge, this immense expansion from of the usual kind of uh, I lose somebody who's important to me and I go to the funeral, and kind of this stick figure version of grief and loss that I had as a child and a young man. And I just had these experiences that blasted me out to a whole new dimension. Again, on the one side was this depth and soul that was available, not just stick figure avoidance, but this rich, human, alive, loamy territory to explore. And I guess the short version of this story is that I grew up. I'm old enough to remember uh, on the occasional Sunday night when I was growing up, there was a television show called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, and it was the most beautiful television experience I'd ever seen. And this Frenchman got on the TV when he did, and he would tell us about this beauty of the undersea world. And he would finish up almost every one of his programs by pointing out, we've been showing you the beauty. We need to show you also the damage that's being done just over here, just out from where we've been pointing. And if this continues, this whole reef area will be dead or will be destroyed, and so on. And I noticed, I was a teenager at that time, and I noticed that I was the only one in tears at the end of that last segment. There was nobody, be they child or be they adult. I never saw anybody else reacting. And that really set me on a path that I am still on today. And that is, I then, quite early on in my life, I found these mentors who could tell me about how is it that we're in a culture that doesn't shed a tear when it's ravaging really the beating heart of the planet. This is a blue planet. This is an ocean planet, and we're killing it. And so that was, back in the 70s. Obviously, all those issues have just continued to grow and grow and grow to the point that we're really at a time of reckoning. So through some programs that I offer here in Living Resilience, and then I also facilitate for some other organizations, we're nudging into what has become a whole new area of offering services to people. And that is grief at the global scale, grief at least at the scale of how can I as a living being remember somehow that I am connected with other people, and I'm connected with this gorgeous, miraculous web of life that we have the privilege to live on. And so this is another dimension that we are intending to open space for, create and hold space for those who join us in these retreats and in the follow-up programs that over months of being with kindred spirits and expanding our ability to be present to this depth. And how does this level of grief open us up to a level of what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing?
Right.
These are extraordinary domains that I didn't have a clue about when my only relationship with grief was avoidance and it's yucky and so on. What it's developed into is actually has saved my life more times than I can count by touching in here.
There's an indigenous perspective that because of patriarchy and colonization, most of us have lost. I remember one of my teachers about 3, maybe 4 decades ago saying, if the body of the earth includes the atmosphere, which we know it does, then we exist as organisms. Human beings exist as organisms, not on the body of the mother, but in the body of the earth, in the body of the mother. And that and some of the experiences I've had in yoga have set me on this path of experiencing that interbeing you describe, of we are all connected. And what are we doing to preserve this one planet that is our home? And like you, I'm very, as a child even, very connected to the land. And what I feel like it's important to recognize is we cannot participate in the shift that is happening on the planet, the shift from patriarchy into partnership, the shift from treating Mother Earth as a resource to reverence, to holding reverence for the systems, the natural systems of Mother Earth. We can't participate in these shifts collectively in that interbeing way until we have first experienced something in our own consciousness, sort of that initial willingness or that initial loss in our own consciousness that prepares us to enter the domain of the collective and do the work that we must do in the collective. And the work we must do in the collective is grief work.
Yeah. I love what you just said, and what came to me is this resonance. We need to learn to resonate, not just be able to see, okay, I see we're damaging the ocean. That's more head and more linear and so on. I'm hearing you're calling out for what shows up in my system in response is a resonance to what you're saying. And that's certainly been my experience out of many quite early on plant medicine journeys. I had that sense of a deep resonance, like something vibrating in resonance to, I was able to be at the beach or in the desert areas quite often when I was young. And that's really set up a way for me to perceive in an ongoing way. And so if I had not opened to that kind of experience, I'm just remembering back to how you just said it, I literally wouldn't have access. I wouldn't know that there's a vibration there to be felt.
Right.
So it seems like it's these, whatever these catalytic moments are, yours will probably be different than mine, but there are so many possibilities that can open us up. And there's one of those that seems consistent with those catalytic experiences, and that is when we're doing it with other people.
Yes.
You know, my early time, all I ever knew was we're supposed to be really quiet and mostly alone and get out of here and so on and get back to work. I remember that one real well. And there's something that is so important, I know, to you and me both, and also to our mentor, Francis Weller. You know, he's made it abundantly clear in his orientation that this experience of grief is to be experienced as a whole, as a village, as a community, as a living, breathing us.
Yeah.
And that has just that one piece alone has taken so much of the stigma and the fear and repulsion out of my system over time. There's really there are very few group experiences that I've experienced that are as nourishing, as deeply nourishing as if we can grieve together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it does sound strange when you first realize, wait, to mature, to become an elder, to experience this interbeing, this resonance with others, I must grieve. And yes, the answer is yes. And grieving in community is profoundly empowering. There is an aliveness that you describe in your work that I describe in mine. There is an aliveness that happens when we can not only experience our grief in the journaling that we do, in the movement, in the breath work, but we can express. And when we are able to express and have that expression held in community, there is an aliveness that happens.
Mhm.
that makes a huge difference in how we actually experience, how we go forward
Yeah.
in our day-to-day lives, how
Yeah.
resourced, how resilient we feel.
Mm. Really well said. And I think that's a good segue into what we were talking about at the very beginning, which is we're going to be offering a few opportunities to get together in groups exactly like what we're talking about right now. Hey there, just another breakaway from the conversation that I had with Melody LeBaron about our upcoming coursework. Really excited to be offering another of our 2-day intensive grief retreats online. And this one is going to be on May 20th and 21st in 2023. And it's going to be 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time on both of those days. And all the information that you could want about what it's going to look like and all the pieces that we're going to be engaging with and so on. All that information is down in the show notes here, in addition to links to take you to information pages and other elements. And of course, how to be able to sign up for that particular 2-day in-depth grief retreat. I'd like to say a bit more about what we've been calling a follow-through program, a way to stay connected with and actually deepen our connection with a number of kindred spirits before and then for quite a while after the 2-day in-depth grief retreat. And this is through a program here in Southern Oregon called Winter Spring. And I'm very pleased to say that this is a volunteer organization, and this particular part of the 2-part offering is free at no charge whatsoever. And it's an 8-week series of Monday evenings, 5:30 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, completely optional. The retreat stands on its own just fine. And this separate 8-week series of evening sessions, again, about large scale grief. And this itself stands on its own quite well as well. But the two together is extraordinary. So I really hope that you can join us for both the 2-day webinar in May 20th and 21st, and then also consider signing up for the separate but equally valuable winter spring large scale grief support, meaning particularly about the issues of climate change and the other large scale, even global scale issues that are challenging to so many of us now. So we're going to go back in just a moment to finish up the conversation that I had with Melody about this scale of grief support. Again, I hope you'll consider joining us for both the 2-day intensive and then the 8-week long support series that is based on the work that reconnects, which of course is the work that's been long-standing. That was started started by and designed by Joanna Macy and her comrade in arms, Molly Young Brown. So I, again, hope you can join us in both of those, which is a way to stay in touch with and in circle with a bunch of kindred spirits who are looking at their own relatedness with grief. What's current for them? What are the issues? What are the dynamics that they need to be focusing on in their own lives? And that kind of follow-up program, that kind of relatedness over time, I find extraordinarily useful in my experience of I've been with a lot of folks as they've been both either grieving someone who's dying or the dying person themselves and doing hospice work. And this is something that is in our system for quite a while, no matter how long we're with or not with the person that we've lost, or whatever the larger scale issue is that we're carrying, the kind of global loss that we're talking about. So please, if you're watching this and you're at all sparked by what Melody and I are sharing, please check out the notes below and show notes about the retreat itself, the follow-up program, a few other resources that I'll be sure to put in there for you. Thank you for watching this. I hope it's been valuable for you. For all the millions of hours of YouTube videos that there are out there, there's still precious few of them about how this soul connectedness can be cultivated out of a more mature relationship with grief. So, Melody, thanks so much for doing this second one with me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Dean.
Thank you for joining us in another episode of the Poetry of Predicament. This podcast is produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance. Living Resilience exists to offer transformative support and resources to the collapse-aware and collapse-acceptant communities around the world. Our sole purpose is to curate and offer coaching, support groups, courses, and events that assist people in expanding their core skills, competencies, and capacities for facing a troubled, predicament-laden, yet still ineffably miraculous world.